It's a sad fact about the world that the variety of English that someone speaks can cause them to be the victim of prejudice. And this prejudice can be quite serious. We'll survey some of the experiments on this topic that have been done over the years before talking in depth about a very troublesome real life case of dialect prejudice in the courtroom. Prejudice against Rochelle Jeantel, who is a witness in the trial of George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin. Match Guy's experiments were developed in the late 1950s by Wallace Lambert and his colleagues who were studying bilingualism in Montreal. They were interested in attitudes towards speakers of English and French. Participants in their experiments listened to recordings of a bilingual speaking each of their languages and then rated them on a variety of social and personal characteristics. So here is something from the abstract of the first paper that came out on this, where they describe the study as saying that students rated speakers on the basis of traits related to desirability in regard to friendship, dependability, intelligence, and character. As expected, English-speaking students rated those speaking in English more favorably, but unexpectedly for the researchers, so did the French-speaking students. And so this is Montreal in the 1950s, where the social and political climate was very much dominated by English speakers. This methodology was subsequently extended to speakers of different varieties of the same language, including a 1975 study by Lambert and colleagues on African American English and mainstream American English. In some cases in these studies, different speakers are used for the two varieties of English or the two languages that are being studied. A range of characteristics have been examined in these studies, and speaker characteristics that people infer from listening to the speech. In an overview, the Zahn and Hopper labeled the three general types as, in some sense, superiority, attractiveness, and dynamism. And the general finding of these studies is that with only the information of what someone sounds like, participants in these experiments will tend to ascribe different attributes on these scales of superiority, attractiveness, and dynamism to speakers of different varieties of English. And unfortunately, and maybe of course, stigmatized varieties, speakers of stigmatized varieties get rated as less attractive on these scales. Purnell et al. Present a really interesting experiment in this tradition that links with the social concerns that we're going to be talking about in the next section. The third author in the study, John Baugh, is tridialectal in African American English, Chicano English, and in what I've labeled here as European American English, but we could also call it mainstream American English. He introduces the study in this video, and it's really great to be able to hear him speaking in these varieties. You can see how naturally he speaks each one, and I'll let you watch that now.
The research was established not to look at the grammatical or dialect distinctions that I talked about, but to see whether or not you could be discriminated against based purely on accent. So I always use the phrase, hello, I'm calling about the apartment you have advertised in the paper, right? But for the purpose of this experiment, I had to modify my speech a little bit, you understand? So I would call and I say, hello, I'm calling about the apartment you have advertised in the paper, right? Or on another occasion, hello, I'm calling about the apartment you have advertised in the paper, right? Now the psychologist in the room will realize this is a wonderful experiment because it's me, right? If I'm denied the apartment, it's not because I'm a different person, it's because they're reacting to my speech.
So the results are here, and what you'll notice is that the difference amongst the varieties, African American Vernacular English, Chicano English, Standard American English, depends on the location of the apartments. And the bias against African American English is strongest in Palo Alto and Woodside. And you might not be surprised to see that the population distribution is predominantly white in these areas and is more balanced in the other areas, especially East Palo Alto and Oakland.